Hello, everybody. How's the mic? I've been gone for a while, so yeah, I just gotta double check when you. I know they don't build podiums for me around here, do they, Emma? Anyways, well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today. I'll be giving some brief remarks, and then we'll be pleased to take some questions afterwards. First off, on behalf of Premier Jason Kenney and my caucus colleagues, I'm pleased to be here to discuss the Government of Alberta's legislative agenda for the upcoming first session of the 30th Legislature. In last month's provincial election, Albertans cast the largest numbers of vote ever for a political party in our province. In doing so, Albertans gave our government a very strong mandate to restore the Alberta Advantage, to get Alberta back to work, and to turn Alberta once again into a key engine of Canadian prosperity. We have an ambitious agenda that will start with the Carbon Tax Repeal Act. The carbon tax is all economic pain with no environmental gain. Not even its proponents have been able to estimate a reduction in emissions, while the tax makes the lives of ordinary Albertans more expensive. Passing the Carbon Tax Repeal Act will mean that ordinary people will no longer be punished for heating their homes and driving to work. Following the Carbon Tax Repeal Act, we will pass the Open for Business Act. That act will make it more attractive for job creators to invest in Alberta again by reversing the massive new costs on businesses imposed by the previous government. It will protect the rights of hardworking Albertans while reducing red tape for those who create jobs. Next, we'll implement the Job Creation Tax Cut. If passed, this act will reduce taxes on employers from 12% to 8%. That's a cut of 1/3 by 2022. It will give Alberta by far the lowest general business tax rate in Canada and one of the lowest in North America. And that will attract investment, start new businesses, and create jobs. Businesses and investors are already responding to the job creation tax cut, and we haven't even tabled it yet. That shows it will be a magnet for investment and major help in getting Albertans back to work. Those are just the first three pieces of legislation we will be introducing in the upcoming session. I expect that we will move about a dozen pieces of legislation before we depart for the summer. The other pieces will fulfill education promises, help newcomers work to their full training and experience, and keep paying the bills until government tables a budget in the fall. We're excited to get to work on this legislative agenda and to start making life better for the people of Alberta. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Will you have anything that's going to replace the climate leadership plan, particularly now that Alberta is once again burning at higher levels than it has been in years?
We've campaigned. First of all, it was a clear mandate from Albertans to get rid of the carbon tax, that this was not the way to address this. We are going to repeal not go forward with the the climate leadership plan. We focused on large emitters, and you'll be hearing from us on the tier program as that develops. So that's the direction that we'll be headed as a government.
Does that mean the rebates will go as part of this legislation as well too, or can you do that without passing legislation?
I'm
rebates
just trying to
for furnaces and for, it was all part of that climate plan.
All of the climate plan will not go forward. That would include the rebates.
Will there be a replacement though? Will there be any plan at all in place, aside from the tier system, to address climate change?
We will be focused on climate change, but our focus on climate change is around technology, focusing to make sure that we can actually tackle the problem. The problem is this: that when the last government was in power, they brought in a tax that even they have admitted did nothing on emissions. Our direction will be a different direction. We'll be focused on technology, working with universities and engineers, working with our largest emitters to actually tackle the problem.
You say focus, but does that mean you're going to leave it up to the private sector? Like, what do you mean by focus?
Well, we will. The tier program, which we will have more to say on in the coming days, will be part of that. But the government has a role to play in it, but so does the private sector.
Will there be any price on carbon for large emitters?
Yes, there will be a price on carbon.
Can I just clarify? So, because the bill says until May 30th, the carbon tax is gone. And I think the thrust of the question is, does everything that flow from that carbon tax, does that die too on May 30th? So, for example, if I've applied for insulation rebates, that's dead on May 30th. Energy Efficiency Alberta, is that dead on May 30th?
Well,
the cities are looking for infrastructure money, the money's being directed to LRT and that sort of thing. Does that end on May 30th too?
As we have always said, we don't need a new tax or a carbon tax to build anything. So there are some commitments that have already been made that will be maintained. We've been clear that infrastructure projects that have been committed to will continue to, even if they're wherever stage they're at. But the reality is, we've been clear, we're not. Albertans that I talk to want to pay for their own light bulbs and shower heads. They don't want a government to tax them and then return and buy them shower heads, light bulbs. So that stuff will stop.
So Energy Efficiency Alberta is dead on May 30th.
Well, Energy Efficiency Efficiency Alberta has more than one component. And so that's the portion that we're looking through right now. If you're asking if we're going to be still subsidizing solar projects or shower heads or light bulbs through that program, the answer is no. But we're working with the department to understand the other parts of Energy Efficiency Alberta before we make a final decision.
You're winding it down, it doesn't all end. Like, for example, Beaumont had that riderless thing that was based on carbon tax money. Does that end on May 30th? It sounds like you're still winding it down over the course of it.
Projects that are already going and that have been approved will continue. But going forward, no, they will not.
Are you able to outline a little bit about your corporate tax plan? Like, are you gonna just have one bill that makes it cut from 12 to 8 over 4 years? Or is it gonna be sort of an incremental process?
There will be one bill that passes that lays that out. So the stages of when those, when each reduction happens will be in that one piece of legislation. We won't have to come back to the House to pass it at each stage.
So you're gonna fulfill your education promise? Does that mean you're gonna proclaim the Education Act?
Yeah, you'll have to, I don't want to get into the great details of each piece of legislation. As you know, we have a responsibility to make sure the opposition does, but in general, that is the promise that I'm referring to, yes.
On the budget, we need interim supply bills. The opposition's already said they're gonna look to see in these interim supply bills if you will fund enrollment growth in education. Will your interim supply bills reflect that?
Well, I think that I will let the Minister of Education speak about that during interim supply. That's that process, and the opposition will be welcome to ask those questions. There is two procedural bills that have to happen because the budget's going to happen in the fall. The first is supplementary supply, which is basically passing the warrants that, quite frankly, the previous government had to put in place while we operated. And then there'll be interim supply, and you guys know that process. It'll happen inside the House, and they'll be able to ask questions on the details of that. And obviously, I'm not in the spot where I can answer for each minister on that today.
All right, folks, we're just going to jump to the phones quickly, and then I'll come back to you guys. Okay, operator, can you please put through the first caller?
Our first question comes from Sol T of the Edmonton Journal. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks. My question is just on the solar projects. We're hearing that there's already quite a few companies that had applied for phase 1 permission to go ahead on some of the solar projects this summer. They applied before the election, but those are still sitting in the queue. They were planning to hire up to do those, and it seems the levy for those projects has already been collected, but they're not hearing anything back from Energy Efficiency Alberta. Are those going forward, and why or why not?
Any project that was approved before the election, I believe the last ones were on April 10th, will certainly be going forward. Going from that point on, there will be reevaluated which direction we go in the program. If there's a levy that has been paid and as a result of the carbon tax being repealed and it needs to be paid back, that will be handled through the bill process, and Minister Tave is the best person to ask about that.
Do you have a follow-up,
So
please?
the levies would be going, so the levies would be going, the levy that's already been collected would be going back to people rather than approving the solar projects to do them this summer.
My understanding is that the EA is oversubscribed already as of April 10th for the funding for the year. And so the question is not relevant because they've already reached the capacity for the year. But I'd have to get back to you in more detail. I'd be happy to do that. I don't know for sure if I'm mistaken on that, but that's my understanding.
Operator, are there any further callers on the line?
There are no other questions on the phone at this time.
I have a question for you as back to Environment Minister. There was a story in the Globe and Mail about Alberta and Ottawa eyeing looser rules for releasing oil sands wastewater, basically water treated from toxic tailings ponds, releasing it into major waterways. What's happening there?
Well, we got the Alberta Environment Parks has a pilot project that's taking place right now. I've asked to be briefed on that. Once we have some more information on where that pilot project is and how it's going, we'll have more to say going forward. But certainly our government's perspective is our number one job will still be to protect water and to protect Albertans. And so we'll look at it through that lens. We'll have to wait to see some more details on how it's went.
It seems as though it's going to be released into the Athabasca River. Is that something that you support, releasing those toxic waters into the Athabasca?
I don't support releasing toxic waters anywhere. The question is through the pilot project and other means of whether or not they're toxic or not. And I don't know the answer to that question, so we'll wait to see what the brief looks like. There's been a pilot project going on, though.
Are you open for Business Act, or are you going to repeal everything that the NDP brought in with regard to changes to the labour relations? And,
No, absolutely not. We were clear during the election that we're not going to repeal everything. But we are going to focus on some of the areas that we've heard from businesses and employers that have caused significant trouble and cost people their jobs. We certainly want to keep aspects of that legislation that the NDP brought forward that deal with protecting people that are being harassed in workplaces or bullying that are taking place in workplaces. This focus will be more on some of the financial side of things, the red tape side of things that we see with that original legislation. And that's what will be debated on the House.
And bringing back the secret ballot, just as a follow-up, secret ballot for organization, resuming that or bringing that back?
Well, you guys are gonna have to see exactly how it's written up in the legislation when we table it, but the reality is we did campaign on that as a problem, and our focus this legislative session will be certainly on fulfilling our promises.
Repealing the farm safety and compensation bill as promised in this session?
We are gonna be, Minister Dreesen will have more to say on that, but that is a promise that was made during the campaign that will be certainly honored. But we have to make sure that we do that right. And as we announced, I believe actually in my riding, just before the election started, that we will repeal Bill 6, it will be gone, but we will be working with the farm and agriculture community on some legislation that will replace it. And Mr. Dreesen will have more to say on what that process looks like. He'll have a more formal announcement on that.
You guys have also promised, as I recall, all take 5% pay cut?
Yeah, we the Premier and us have actually the Premier has promised to take a 10% pay cut, and MLAs to take a 5% pay cut. Our caucus is still committed to that promise. Now the reality is that's not a government decision; that's a decision that has to be undertaken by member services. But the majority of members of the new Member Services Committee obviously are United Conservative Party members who have committed to those pay cuts. So once we have a speaker elected this afternoon and he is able to call a Member Services Committee, we'll work through those details with them.
Did you have a beer in a campsite this weekend?
No, I did not. Actually, I did not in a campsite, but I did have a beer on public lands out by the Yaha Tinda with my family who was camped there on Sunday. I was able to spend a couple hours with them on their camping trip. But other than that, I spent most of the weekend traveling around with Environment Park staff and working check stops and cooking for our officers who worked all across the province.
What were you doing? What were you doing? I know you tweeted a picture of the flyover.
Yeah.
Well, what exactly were you looking at in that flyover?
We wanted to travel the weekend with Environment Park staff who were working on public lands in these vast areas, and so by being able to jump in the helicopter with them, we were able to see exactly what's going on. It's a lot different from the air, just how vast it is, and so we were able to see everything from how many people were camping to the different boundaries of some of the conversations that we've had, the different infrastructure that is already out there, and so it was a good opportunity for me to have, though I've lived there for a long time, but to be able to see it from the department's perspective and understand what they're dealing with, both in general in the area, but also on something like the May Long weekend, which is one of the busiest times of the year out there.
And is this going to set the stage for, I know you had talked about in terms of Bighorn, the West Country, having more enforcement in there? Is it something you're still looking at?
I have, even before I was elected, our communities were calling for more enforcement in what we call the West Country. Nobody in our area knows what you're referring to when they say the Bighorn. But when you say the West Country, we've been calling for it for a long time. And I ran a lodge in the Bighorn for a long time before I was in public life. We was part of the crews that started the first May Long Weekend Task Force. It was crazy in the early 2000s. That was the only word for it. And so from that point on, we recognized that enforcement was one of the most important things that we need for the West Country, and nothing I saw this weekend changes my mind about that. We need to continue to do it. My understanding is we had a pretty good May Long weekend in the West Country. Nothing too significant, no major incidents or at least volume of incidents, and that's because the task force of officers from different agencies across the province come there on those long weekends and work really hard to enforce the rules. What our communities want to see is to see that continue throughout the year to be able to protect the West Country.
We're just,
Are you bringing Clare's Law then in this session?
I don't know the status of Clare's Law, so I'd have to get back to you on that.
Something to lead to some sort of law and order bill, was that, unless I misread that?
Yeah, I don't, I'm not aware of Clare's Law coming. I know we intend to do Clare's Law. I don't know if it's going to hit the floor of the session or not. I may be wrong on that one, Dean, but
Do you know what it is then that you're referring to? In terms of
looking at the list right now.
Maybe I misheard you. I thought it was some kind of a justice bill coming.
Do you want us to give us a whole list? That's fine.
I can't do that. They call a point of privilege on me and I get in big trouble. So you're trying to get me in trouble, Emma. I saw that. Yeah, exactly. I don't see it on there. I don't think it's coming through.
so, sorry, we just had a question from Radio Canada, and then we'll be looking to wrap up shortly after that.
One specific question on the carbon rebates. Will Albertans who receive their quarterly rebate, should they expect a check come July 1st, or is it over?
Well, the legislation, which has to happen from the Minister of Finance, because it's actually associated with a tax and money, has you'll see within the bill when you get briefed on it that it has the marks to do that. And yes, the rebates will be paid to the point where the tax is repealed. So there's a point where the tax will be repealed, and any rebates that were owed before that will be paid during that period of time.
Partial check in July?
Yeah, I would assume so, but I refer you to Mr. Finance on that.
Do you have any emissions targets for Alberta, and what are they?
We will have more to say on our climate, our focus on climate change and the way that we're going to go as we do it. But our direction, again, is on technology. We'll be standing up the tier program. And as we put that together, we'll have more to say on it soon.
More generally, do you see climate change, is your government in crisis mode when it comes to thinking about climate change, especially with the wildfires going on right now?
In crisis mode? No, certainly not. We're not in crisis mode. We're focused on actually being able to address emissions, where the previous government focused on taxing Albertans and then admitted that they had no ability to be able to curb emissions by doing that. Our focus, we've been clear on it, it's what Albertans voted overwhelmingly for, is a focus on technology and working with our industry and our largest emitters to be able to tackle this problem. And we'll have more to say about it in the coming days.
Have you had discussions with your federal counterpart in terms of federal carbon tax coming in once the provincial one is gone? Are you the point person on that? I assume
we're in contact with our federal counterparts, both Minister Savage and I haven't spoken directly to the Minister of Environment federally yet, but we have been in contact with the Trudeau government. Look, the reality is that if they bring in a backstop, it's less than the tax that the NDP were putting on Albertans. And our Premier has been clear on what our fight back strategy is on that. We will continue to defend Albertans. But when it comes
officially in terms of
no, they have not sent us anything official. Yeah. And when it comes to the carbon tax, the overwhelming amount of Albertans voted for what is the #1 platform promise of this government, which is to repeal the carbon tax. That promise will be kept here in a few short weeks, and I can tell you I'll be happy when I get to go back to Rimbey Rocky Mountain House Sundry and tell them the promise made and the promise kept.
Do you guys have a court battle plan yet? As in, have you decided when the challenge against the federal tax is going to be launched?
We're still reviewing the decision, and I will. The Premier will have more to say on that in the coming days. But we are going to fight back, and we are going to continue to use every tool at our, that is available to us to be able to defend Albertans from both now, before this, the Notley and the NDP carbon tax, and now against the Trudeau carbon tax.
All right, folks, we'll let you follow up there, Tyler, and then we'll take one more question after that. Thank you.
I was just going to ask the UCP party was an intervener in the Ontario court case. Now that you guys are in government, who's footing those legal bills?
I don't know the answer to that question. My understanding right now is that the party is still the party that is involved, because our previous government would not take that step, and so we did as the official opposition, which is an unprecedented step. You'd have to refer to Mr. Schweitzer on when that step may or may not change.
When will we know the details about the war room? I believe that Minister Savage said that was coming this week.
Yes, that's my understanding. That's coming this week, and I don't want to step in front of Minister Savage on that, so we'll let her speak.
There's no health-related legislation here, so you've got anything planned in the health field?
Well, we have, here's the reality, Dean, is we're coming with 12 or 13 bills at least at the moment. I have not said that there will not be any more, but we're in a spring session. We've had indications already from the opposition that they want to filibuster the agenda that Albertans voted for. So we'll get to work on the 12 or 13 that we have from now, and once we get those through, you're going to see more. We will continue to fulfill our promises to Albertans. You're going to get me in trouble because you called last question already and I didn't listen, so we'll see you guys soon. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.